Hello Year 5 and welcome to your first Flip Learning English video. Last week we were looking at use of the relative clause, so I wanted to create this short video for you to watch and use to help you complete your homework this weekend. When we started looking at the relative clause, we realised we needed to remind ourselves what pronouns were. We needed to look at relative pronouns, but first of all understand what a pronoun is in general. So a pronoun is a word which takes the place of a noun. A noun is a person, place, animal or thing. We use pronouns so that we don't repeat the noun too often, mainly because that becomes boring and it also becomes quite confusing. So if we have a little look at this example below. Mrs. Morris went to the shop to buy some bread. Mrs. Morris bought Mrs. Morris and Mrs. Morris's dog some treats. As you can see, that sentence, A is a bit boring using Mrs. Morris over and over again, and it also gets quite confusing. So the noun that's being repeated here is Mrs. Morris, and you can see it's been repeated 4 times in 2 sentences. And what we need to do is replace some of those Mrs. Morrises with some pronouns. So I don't know if you can think of any. Mrs. Morris went to the shop to buy some bread. What could we use instead of this one? I think probably she is a good one to use there, isn't it? She bought. Do I want to say she bought Mrs. Morris? Not really, do I? I want to say she bought herself. And Mrs. Morris's dog some treats. What would we change that for? She bought herself and her dog some treats. So that's thinking about use of pronouns in general and why we use them in sentences. If we go on though, today is all about using relative pronouns to create the relative clause. And examples of relative pronouns are who, whose, where, which, that, when and why. There are other ones out there as well, but these are some really good ones to start with. Come back and use this video when you're completing your worksheet so that you can have a little look and remind yourself of these relative pronouns and use them to create some relative clauses. So then now we need to move on to think about the relative clause. So a relative clause adds extra information to a sentence by using a relative pronoun to replace the noun before adding detail. So that can sound quite complicated, but let's just break it down a little bit here. So I'll say it again. The relative clause adds extra information to a sentence. And we do that by using a relative pronoun and then adding on extra detail. So let's have a look at a couple of examples. So here I have got a nice simple sentence. The boat was going to France. Can you identify the nouns in this sentence? Hopefully you've noticed that boat is a noun and France is a noun. But for the purposes of the relative clause, we're going to focus on the noun boat. Okay, so I've got my simple sentence, the boat was going to France. If you look at this sentence below, what I've done is I've used my simple sentence, the boat was going to France. Instead of putting a full stop, I've used a comma. And then what I've done, instead of saying the boat was going to France, full stop, the boat was picking up passengers, I've put a comma and used a relative pronoun. And the relative pronoun that I've used is where. Okay, so I've said the boat was going to France, comma, where it was picking up passengers. Got my original sentence, used a comma instead of a full stop, used one of my relative pronouns and added on more information. That's one way we can use the relative clause. Another way we can use the relative clause is shown below. So if we have a look now at this sentence, I've done another nice simple sentence. The girl was scared. What's the noun in this sentence? Okay, hopefully you've identified that girl is the noun in this sentence. Now, what I've done below here is this time I haven't used a comma on the end and added on more detail. Instead, in this sentence here below, I've still got my original sentence, the girl was scared, but I've slotted the relative clause, the extra information, into the middle of the sentence. So I've put the girl, comma, and then I've got my relative pronoun. Sorry, let's just do that again. I've got the girl, comma, I've used my relative pronoun who. So the girl, comma, who had spotted a ghost, comma, was scared. Okay, just a little bit of a technical fault there, so I'll just go through that again. This time, I've still got my simple sentence, the girl was scared, but by using 2 commas and a relative pronoun, I've added the information into the middle of the sentence. So you can either use a relative pronoun and then add the extra information onto the end of the sentence, or you can use a relative pronoun and add the extra information into the middle of the sentence. Okay, I hope that all makes sense to you, along with the work we covered in class last week. What I'd really like you to do now is watch this video again if you'd like to, and then have a go at the worksheet. And remember, you have got your list of relative pronouns on this video to help you to do that. Good luck.